When we're in the midst of the storm, it is easy to lose hope, and sometimes it is hard to see that God and His messengers have always been there for us. This dream reminds us that we all have access to the great power of Jesus Christ. God's messengers offer guidance and support, ensuring even when the bridges are battered, they can be rebuilt stronger than before. These messengers might appear as a form of a kind word, a helping hand, or a timely intervention. Each one a reminder that we are truly never alone. When I was 16, I started to learn how to drive. Driving on the streets was okay, but learning to drive on freeways in Southern California was terrifying. There's an official speed limit, which will show up here, of 65 miles per hour, which is 104 kilometers an hour. And you can see, if you ever watch Southern California news, there's different speed limits. Most people drive 123 kilometers per hour. Police will give you a ticket at 136 kilometers per hour. And high-speed chases are about 160 kilometers an hour. So there's kind of this weird thing down there. If you ever have visited Southern California or are intending to, perhaps to see Disneyland, the beach, Loma Linda, or any attraction, just know you have to take the freeway. It is the arterial lifeblood of the region, where without it, you cannot get from one end to another. It is pretty convenient because you're always within 5 to 10 minutes within any freeway entrance for the most part. The system is so ingrained in the psyche of Californians that our entire lives, expressions, vocabularies revolve around this transportation entity. If a friend wanted to have dinner in Santa Monica, and I was coming from Orange County, we would negotiate what time we could meet there. 6 p.m. on Thursday? No way, that's an hour and a half of traffic. Friday at 6 p.m.? You must be joking me. Sunday at 11 a.m.? Yeah, that works. When you meet someone up for a social engagement, a typical start of a conversation would be always, how was your drive? And when the social engagement ends, you would say, have a safe drive. It's almost like have a blessed day, but a weird version of that. On the slide before, there's slides of freeways on here. So this is one of the actual freeway systems in LA, I think the 110 interchange. And as convenient as the freeway system is, to get from one side to another, it does come with these moments of chaos. Sometimes you'd be driving at 11 p.m. and it's an all-stop at the 405 for an hour because of an accident. Or the president would come into town for a fundraiser where there would be mass panic. Everyone texting, go home now, or you'll be stuck forever in traffic. A while back, next slide, there was a viral image of 16 lanes of traffic gridlock representing Thanksgiving Eve where everybody wanted to go home and have dinner with their families. But the actual truth is this is every day after work. I even had an instance where I was driving to Los Angeles International Airport to drop my partner off, and I saw a bunch of smoke in front of me. We were driving on the 405 to the 105, and no joke, like an action movie, on the right-hand lane, I saw a fire on the ground slowly creeping towards me on here. While driving the freeway, I was like, nope, I'm not getting stuck behind the smoke and a fire, so went on the emergency lane, zoomed out like Vin Diesel and Fast and the Furious, and made it to the airport. Just another day driving in California. However, the freeway system has faced significant controversy because the construction often involved creating these highways through impoverished communities with limited political influence. As a result, even today, certain neighborhoods are gentrified because of how the highway was built, highlighting the issues of inequality and limited access to resources. When I moved here a couple years ago, I was kind of surprised the highway system was different where it didn't cut through the city. Through some research, I learned that Vancouver almost walked the same road Los Angeles did. In the 1960s, there were protests that a future freeway would cut through Chinatown, Gastown, and several other neighborhoods. The protests were successful. As you will notice, we don't actually have highways cutting through Vancouver. You have to drive quite a bit east on 12th to get to Trans-Canada Highway. And to get to any of the bridges, you have to take the streets through the city. These pivotal protests in the 1960s created a better way of supporting our communities through sustainable urban design. While highways allow us to navigate much of British Columbia, they cannot alone complete our journey. To truly connect and reach us to our destinations in BC, we must also rely on bridges to cross the bodies of waters that separate us. In the book, Incredible Crossings, available at your library, it details nearly every bridge in BC. According to the book, we have 2,973 bridges and 73 tunnels. Some 2,264 of those are over rivers and lakes, and over 144 are over rail lines. If you connect all the bridges end to end, it would be 150 kilometers. To visualize, imagine a giant bridge from YVR to Camp Hope. That's about 150 kilometers. If you think about highways and bridges, where one point is you, and the other part is God, you want to make sure that the bridges you build in your life are built on sturdy spiritual foundations. Like how the protests in Vancouver created a more sustainable and community-focused urban design, we should aim to build our spiritual bridges in a way that nurtures our communities and brings everyone closer to God. One of the first steps to make sure our community is for them to know who we are. I personally struggle with sharing my faith outside of church because I'm a little shy talking about it. I remember one day, my partner and I were having a dinner with family friends in Seattle, and one of them asked, "Who is Jesus?" This was not a malicious question. This was a legitimate question where somebody in my network didn't know who Jesus was. I kind of assumed everybody would know who Jesus was, but that's not always the case. At our school and work, it's tough. But the first step for people to know is to be transparent with our identity. Maybe when someone asks how your weekend was, you might drop the line, "I went to church on Saturday," and just see how it goes. You'll probably get a litany of follow-up questions after that, I guarantee. Once there's awareness in community, the next step is to make sure we do sustainable spiritual urban design so we don't tear anybody down like how highways can tear through a community. That means the really tough job of integrating our character like Christ and being kind, inclusive, and accepting as much as we can. In the world of social media, it is easy to have a lot of acquaintances, but it's tough to build deep relationships. True spiritual bridges are not built by speed or quantity, but the quality of our connection with God and others. As you cross the bridge of your spiritual life, ask yourself not how much you know, but how deeply have you connected with God this week? It only takes meditating on a single verse to sink deeply in our hearts to allow it to transform us. Or maybe it's just that quick prayer before you send that email, Teams, or Slack message that would give you wisdom. The small, intentional moments of life are the connections, are the building blocks of a sustainable urban design that will help us endure the challenges of life. God is always there in the background with his angels and messengers, providing providential timing of people and events at the right time. Now, let's shift our focus to a different kind of bridge, one where the point is you and the other point is God's nature. To experience the beautiful sights of places like Squamish, Joffrey Lakes, or Garibaldi, you have to cross over to the North Shore. On the map behind, the first option, the left of the map, is to take the Lionsgate Bridge. The bridge first opened to pedestrians on November 12, 1938, and oddly enough, the first name of the bridge, or the draft name of the bridge, was Jubilee Bridge. But marketers came up with the name Lionsgate Bridge because lions are cooler. The bridge's construction faced a complicated political history. Initially, it was halted because the federal government, aligned with CP Rail, didn't want it to be built to compete with the railway. However, a change of government eventually resolved the issue, allowing the project to move forward. Despite the politics to get the bridge started, it was actually completed months ahead of schedule. Now, as we all go to the North Shore, you have two options. You put in Google Maps, you're going to be Lionsgate or Second Narrows Bridge. After World War I, with the North Shore growing in population, the idea of another bridge emerged. The second Narrows Bridge opened to November 7, 1925, to rail traffic, but was marred in tragedy since its opening. In our next picture here, in March 10, 1927, it was hit by the SS Urania, a 10,000-ton freighter causing damage to the bridge span. Later, there's no picture here, the SS Norwich City hit the bridge again, and in 1930, can everybody guess what happened? The SS Losmar struck the south span. Next slide, please. You think the story is done? In 1930, the Pacific Gatherer, a log barge, became wedged underneath the bridge and lifted the tide, and the bridge was closed for 4 years. Next slide, please. Okay, we think we're done, but after World War II, they needed to do some renovations in 1956, but unfortunately, during construction, engineers miscalculated a load, and part of the bridge fell, killing 18 ironworkers. Next slide. That's why today we can call it the Second Narrows Bridge, but it's often called Second Narrows Ironworkers Memorial Bridge to commemorate those that died during that accident. All right, we think we're done with this, but one more time. In 1979, kind of in recent history, the freighter Japan Erica collided with this bridge again. Since then, the bridge, praise God, has worked as intended and are one of our two viable options. Two bridges connect to North Vancouver, but the Lionsgate Bridge had no drama, and the Ironworkers Bridge was full of heartache, tragedy, and hardship. Looking at this, in terms of our spiritual journey, some weeks are driving over the Lionsgate Bridge without traffic, a pretty smooth drive. But maybe sometimes our lives are like the Ironworkers Bridge, where ship after ship seems to crash into us, disrupting our peace and shattering our dreams. You know, dreams are kind of a weird thing. In university, I went to school in Southern California. Next slide. And fun fact, our mascot was an anteater. It's weird, right? UCLA gets a bear, but at least we weren't a banana slug like UC Santa Cruz. And that's actually a true statement. You can look that up online. Anyways, we were in the quarter system, and without fail, for 4 years, I had a dream before every final that I would drive to school and miss the final. This happened every time, and praise God, those dreams ended once I finished school. In grade 3, though, I had my only dream of life about God. I remember sitting down, and God was standing there by pearly gates. It was hard to describe, like a raw presence. I wasn't afraid, but I was all in His presence when I woke up. Since then, I've had dreams about church, maybe nightmares about church activities gone wrong, maybe dreams about missing kids in youth events, but never anything that intense as when I was that young. And when we think about the topic of dreams, there's an interesting one with Jacob. So if you have your digital Bibles or Bibles, we're going to be in Genesis 25, and we're going to start in 21. Previous slide. So we have a diagram here of, this is the story of Jacob and Esau. So Isaac was 40 when he first married Rebekah. They prayed for kids, and eventually the dream came true, and Esau and Jacob were born, but with double surprise twins. So remember, when you pray, be careful what you get for, because you may get double blessed. We're going to read a couple verses skipping around. So in verse 20, Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. In 21, Isaac prayed to the Lord, for his wife was unable to have children. 24, when she reached the end of her pregnancy, she discovered she had twins. And 26b, Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. There's kind of an interesting fact here. Looking at the timelines, they were praying for a long, long time, like 20 years. But the Lord answered their prayers, and they had twins. We're going to go through all the details, but here's kind of a chapter summary for the rest of the story. So, if you go to chapter 25, when they were young, Jacob asked for his birthright from Esau, and Esau shockingly gives it away to him nonchalantly. Chapter 26, there's a famine in the land. Isaac becomes rich and loaded. Esau marries Judith. And in chapter 27, there's a kind of a bizarre story where Jacob poses as Esau, planning with his mom for a blessing from his dad. And then Esau wants to kill Jacob, just standard family drama. But we're going to focus on a particular point that happens after all this drama. So in Genesis 28:12, it says, "He dreamed and saw a raised staircase or bridge, its foundation on earth and its top touching the sky, and God's messengers were ascending and descending from it. Suddenly, the Lord was standing on it and saying, 'I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land which you are lying. Your descendants will become like dust of the earth, and you will spread out west, east, north, and south. Every family of earth will be blessed because of you and your descendants. I am with you now. I will protect you everywhere you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised you.'" In this verse, we see a powerful image of a bridge from earth to heaven, made possible through Jesus Christ, with messengers moving back and forth between the two realms. This reminds us in our lives when we encounter situations that seem unexplainable. Moments like this make sense only viewed through the lens of divine intervention. These messengers, whether they're literal angels or people acting under God's guidance, play a crucial role in our spiritual journey. We're not going to go through the rest of the story, but I encourage you to read on your own time. At this point, Jacob's character changes, and then there's a very long wrestling match, about 10 to 12 hours, much longer than anything you would see from like Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior, followed by drama with his brother and a final reconciliation. Going back to the North Shore and the story of bridges, this story is a reminder of the importance of building strong, resilient foundations in our spiritual lives. Just as the ironworker's bridge stands firm despite the many challenges it has faced, a foundation rooted in faith can help us navigate the tough days ahead. While we may encounter obstacles or trials, it is our connection to God that can provide strength and support, helping us to rebuild and endure no matter what comes our way. I would say, generally speaking, my spiritual journey, and I expect many of you here, have their ups and downs. In James 1:2-3, it states, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Just like the iron worker's bridge, our faith may be shaken, but we have faith our bridge will be rebuilt and stronger when hard times come. In November 2023, I heard terrible news from my family. My mom had told me my dad was diagnosed with late-stage colon cancer. We weren't sure how much time he would have left, but last December, I got an urgent call saying, "Come back quickly." So I came back to California. I spent much time in the hospital, and it was clear that there was not much more the doctors could do. My dad had one request, though, to come home. At that time, it was very uncertain that was even possible due to his condition. But somehow, the doctors found the perfect treatment plan just to get him well enough to get discharged and to have hospice care at home. I thought about the sermon last week, and the challenges and discussions of hospice care are many, and as a society, we don't talk about them enough. During that tough time, it was helpful to have a routine of starting day in prayer, packing food for the hospital, and then ending the day of prayer. Lots of uncertainties fly through your head at times like this for an ailing parent. How much will care cost? How do we take care of him 24/7? We were so exhausted. And then my mom remembered a couple from her home church. They were professional caregivers, and just happened to be free to take care of my dad for the night shifts. When my mom took care of my dad during the day, the couple came during night. Only a short 7 days later, he passed away. At that point, my bridge collapsed and the deck was gone. Death is always a challenge in our lives, and it's hard to know how we will react when it happens. For me, I am grateful that I did not blame God for what happened. And as much as I have a lot of grief in my heart, God's presence was still there. You know, Adventist theology is sometimes tough to talk about, but sometimes things like state of the dead and being grounded theologically in many of these things really help support the foundation and the pillars of the bridge despite the bridge span collapsing. But the thing that really supported me and my family, what I feel were the messengers of God. Everything is still a blur to me. There are things that you don't want to deal with, just as the logistics of finding a service or going through your parents' old stuff. But that couple, I believe somehow the angels cleared their schedules and helped my family right exactly when we needed them. That timing made me think that this wasn't a coincidence, but God's divine providence. Even months later, when I run to them at my mom's church, I am still grateful, even though it was a short 7 days. One of the challenging things is going through old family videos. First off, my dad left a lot of media of stuff I've never heard of, like VHS-C and Video 8, but I eventually got to the queue of digitizing everything. As I watched some of the videos, a lot of them were of the family at church, and my dad helping out the budding Vietnamese American church, which was in its infancy after the war, after the refugees had settled in California. You know, building a bridge over water is a pretty magical process. First off, you need to build a waterproof workspace in the water where piles and sturdy columns get placed into the ground, which reach stable soil or bedrock. Ensuring the base can support the weight of the bridge. Once the foundation is secure, they construct the pillars by setting molds and pouring reinforced concrete. I realized that my dad, by being active in the church, had already set the foundations of the bridge as a young child. He was consistent in his faith and provided a model for the rest of his family. He provided safety, love, and a reflection of God's presence. After I left California, a series of church friends stayed with my mom afterwards. And it's just one of those things I have a hard time saying, this is just coincidence, but I believe God continued to help out. In our spiritual journey, we have the ability to communicate with God. But when a ship runs into your bridge, remember that if you have strong pillars nestled, the bridge can be rebuilt. When we go through tragedy, it is easy where the grief can be seized near our heart, and it can be hard to let it go. But in the darkest of situations, the unseen hand of God is there with his angels and messengers. As we journey through life, we're constantly building connections as we cross one point to another. These bridges are more than pathways. They symbolize our personal efforts to connect with one another and God. I've come to realize that bridges we build in our spiritual lives are of utmost importance. They require careful planning, strong foundation, and the resilience to withstand the trials that come our way. You can build these foundations by prayer, reading the Bible, attending church, volunteering ministry, or attending something like intergenerational Sabbath school. Like the Lionsgate Bridge, some seasons of life are smooth and straightforward, requiring little more than just driving over. But at other times, we find ourselves on the Ironworkers Bridge, facing tragedy, heartache, and unexpected challenges. You know, life is tough. I think each one of us have gone through a rough patch where we might ask, where is God? But remember, read Jacob's dream one more time. In Genesis 28:12, it states, "He dreamed and saw a raised staircase, bridge, its foundation on earth, and its top touching the sky, and God's messengers were ascending and descending from it." When we're in the midst of the storm, it is easy to lose hope. And sometimes it is hard to see that God and his messengers have always been there for us. This dream reminds us that we all have access to the great power of Jesus Christ. God's messengers offer guidance and support, ensuring even when the bridges are battered, they can be rebuilt stronger than before. These messengers might appear as a form of a kind word, a helping hand, or timely intervention. Each one a reminder that we are truly never alone.